Every year, I set myself a challenge to play through a horror game through the month of October for spooky season. It's been quite a fun thing to do every year. Last year, I played the original Fear game, which was really good. 2 bean, 1 cup latte. And if you haven't played it yourself, do yourself a favor and play it. But this year, I'm getting myself into game development, and I figured instead of playing a game this month, why don't I make one? So I set myself a new challenge to make a horror game in 2 weeks.
So you have basically no game dev experience, and you want to make a game in 2 weeks? Well, this should go well.
So I've been trying to think of interesting spooky things I can do for this game, and I kind of figured what people don't like is people looking at them and watching them. People don't like people following them, not knowing where that person is but they can see you kind of thing. And one thing I've never seen in a video game before is having the camera from the monster or the enemy or the other NPC's player's perspective looking at you. And it got me thinking, I don't think that would actually be that hard to do, but it's quite an interesting idea, especially for a horror game where you're actually being chased by the monster. I'm sure I'll find out why this has never been done before, but I've never seen it in a video game, and I figured why not give it a try? It's a cool, interesting twist I can add to this game. And the other thing I've been thinking about is those old school Resident Evil games where they used to have those fixed camera perspectives on like the PlayStation 1. And I actually quite like that aesthetic. I think it works really well for a horror game. So I figured why not mix the two and have it have those fixed camera perspectives, and I'll make those like CCTV cameras or something, so it gives that kind of unnerving feeling of something or someone watching you. And then also have the monster, if it gets too close to you or something, it then cuts to that monster's perspective and you see its arms like crawling at you or trying to chase you or whatever. And I feel like that would be pretty scary. So first things first, I need to write down all the features that I want to have in this game, and I need to keep it very streamlined because we've only got 2 weeks to make this game. So I'm making a list in my Trello. I'm going to have one column for the core features of this game, and I'm going to have a second column for like the nice to haves, where if I get those core features done, I can then move on to the nice to haves. So these are the core features I want to have. One, I want to have the fixed camera perspectives of the CCTV cameras that you can walk between each room and it will transition to different CCTV cameras. I want to have the monsters be able to chase you, and then if they can see you and you're within a certain distance of that monster, I want it to be able to cut to that monster's perspective. A weapon system in there, so I want to have some guns, I want to have some melee combat in there. And then for the actual objective of the player, I want you to be able to escape the environment. So I'm probably going to make this like a big warehouse shipping container room. And I think an easy fun thing I can do is like maybe just have a couple of keys around the environment, and you've got to find those keys to open the exit door, the big door at the end of the level. I figured one of the things I could do to save some time is take the damage system from my rail shooter game along with maybe the enemies as well, and use Unreal's super handy migrate feature where you can just choose whatever folders you want to migrate over, select the project file, and then it will just literally send those files over. I added my first weapon to the game, and I found this really rustic old looking Makarov like Russian pistol on Sketchfab that I think looks absolutely perfect. I really want the weapons to be really old and rusty and kind of crappy in a way. So I downloaded the file and slapped it into Character Creator 4, which is what I usually use to rig characters and props and things. I went about retexturing it because I want the game to be a PS1 aesthetic, so all these nice fancy PBR textures and materials have got to go. We're going basic 256 by 256 textures, no reflections, nothing. Slap that texture back onto the model, and then I rigged the pistol in Character Creator 4, transferred that over to iClone 8 to do the cool animations for the firing, and then finally brought that back into Unreal Engine 5. Day 2, I started to get things moving. I made a test level so that I could try out all these different features and be easier to test things. And I also started work on the CCTV system. I found this really good tutorial by Yagman X. She has a really great series on how to make this fixed camera perspective like the Resident Evil games. It's actually really easy. You basically just use a box collision and a camera, and then use some code so when the character overlaps with that collision box, it cuts to the camera. You can get really fancy with these, and you could add like splines and things for the cameras to move down, but I'm not really going for that because I wanted these cameras to look like CCTV cameras following you around the environment. On day 3, I ended up creating what I'm going to coin the second person camera system, or monster camera perspective. I don't know what sounds better. But like I said, this is one of the core features I wanted to get done in this game, where when the monster's close enough and it can see you, it can cut to that monster's perspective. I did this really easily by just basically following the same logic as the fixed camera perspectives. So I added a sphere collision around the enemy, and then whenever the player collides with that sphere collision, it cuts to the perspective of the monster. I was kind of toying around with the idea of actually physically attaching the camera to the monster's skeleton, like on the head bone, or it'd be better if it was just floating. And I realized you have to be really careful with this, so you have to always make sure that no matter what animation you do, the camera is always pointing at the player, and so the player can always work out where they are in the environment. After messing around with this for a little bit, I do think it actually started to look pretty cool, and when you're being chased by the monster, it does actually look pretty scary. But there was one weird bug with this system. Because it's a sphere collision, and that's the only variable between cutting to the monster camera, at least there's some weird things where if the monster's, say, close to a wall, and you're on the other side of the wall, the sphere collision can overlap the other side of that wall, and then you collide with it, and then it cuts the monster's camera even though it can't actually see you. So we're gonna have to fix that. I started off the day by modeling one of the enemies I wanted to make. I really wanted this crawling type enemy that would be like dragging itself along the floor and like trying to claw at you. I figured this would work really well with that second person camera perspective where it cuts to the monster's perspective. Seeing something crawling along the ground chasing you and trying to claw at you, I feel like that'd be pretty scary. So I opened up Blender and started modeling. I am very new to Blender. I do not do much 3D modeling. And this turned out to be a massive waste of time. I just didn't know it yet. After modeling for a while, I went back into Unreal Engine. I started modeling and blocking out the actual game level. Just on a really basic level, moving some things around, kind of trying to work out what the space would be. I really like the idea of having this kind of cargo warehouse construction sort of environment where you're just like an average worker person and then this weird stuff starts happening around you. I also figured it would work really well with the idea of having a CCTV system. Like if you had this in a house, you're not really going to have an indoor CCTV system, but in a warehouse or in a cargo area, more likely to have a CCTV system. So I figured it would fit really well thematically. It's coming up to the end of the first week and I am continuing to waste more time creating animations, as I thought I wanted tank controls in the game like the original Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1, and then I realized I didn't want those, and I figured maybe actually what I want is strafe movement. And so I built all of that and built animations for that, and then it turns out nope, that's not what I wanted. What I actually wanted was the basic movement that I already had in Unreal Engine 5, and I wasted a bunch of time. And this is the theme for this whole challenge, is just keep things streamlined. Work out every single detail of the game that you want to make. Otherwise, you end up like me and you waste loads of time doing things you didn't need to do.
Well, hopefully it will be worth the effort, right? Oh god, it's horrible.
Determined to do better than I did last week, I decided I would work on one of the big core features of the game, the weapon system. I spent a while looking around for different tutorials on YouTube, and I came across Pitchfork Academy's YouTube tutorial, his Weapon System 2.0 tutorial. And after watching it, I figured this one was probably the best out of all of them and gave this one a go. So I created various animations and poses for the player character to be able to like hold the weapons. Added things called sockets to the player character's skeletal mesh so that the weapons can attach to those sockets. And I created a bunch of code to make this all work. So now I can spawn weapons on the ground, I can walk up to them, and then I can pick them up and I can fire them, which is pretty cool. After creating the first ranged weapon, I figured I should add some of the melee weapons in, like a crowbar and a lead pipe. I feel like these are those sort of rustic things you would find in a warehouse. But in trying to add these melee weapons, I really struggled with the animations for these. This tutorial, whilst it was really good, it was definitely designed for guns and just guns only. So all the animations were playing on the weapons and not on the actual player character, which gave me some very weird results.
What the hell is even that?
But in my game, I want to have various different items that the player can interact with, like key cards, health packs, guns, melee weapons. This weapon interaction system really bites me in the arse a bit later. But after a few days of coding and following along with this tutorial, I had a pretty cool weapon system. Oh, okay. We can fix that quickly. Okay, it's still not working. Ah, there we go. See, now it's starting to look pretty cool. So after that long process of trying to get the weapon system working, I finally got one of the weapons to work properly. I don't know about you, but I think that's starting to look pretty good now. Just ignore that left hand, okay? It's fine.
Oh my god.
I said don't look at it, don't look at it, it's fine. We'll fix it later. I decided to work on the other firearm I wanted in the game. I feel like a pump action shotgun fits nicely with the aesthetic of the game. So just like before, I worked on the idle pose as well as the aiming pose for the shotgun and used a blend with boolean to blend between those two poses so that you can aim and idle when you use the right mouse button. And then I created the weapon pickup actor blueprint for it. The thing with shotguns though is that they're a two-handed weapon and you use your left hand to rack the forestock whenever you reload the shotgun. So I needed to add something called left hand IK. This was actually surprisingly easy to do in Unreal Engine. You just need to add the two-bone IK and fab IK nodes to your animation blueprint. And then the easiest way to get these two nodes set up is just to hit play on your engine, aim your weapon, and then eject the camera so then you can sort of move it around and get it into a better view. You then just need to adjust the socket that you add to your weapon until the hand is sitting in the correct position on the weapon. And then finally you just need to adjust the joint target location node so you make sure you get the elbow in the correct position and it doesn't look completely cursed.
Oh my god!
And after messing around with this for a little bit, I ended up getting some pretty nice results. And so to end the day, I tinkered with my take damage system that I migrated over from my light gun game. If you want to know more about that light gun game and the take damage system, make sure you go check out that video on my channel. At this point, with only 2 days left, I figured I should try and tackle one of the other core features of the game, which is the door system. So I can create the exit for the game and the main objective for the players to achieve. And this is where the limitations of that interaction system from the weapons tutorial I was following really started to show. The main problem is that it wasn't designed to work with data assets, which is what I like to use for weapons and other items in the game. And because it's only really designed to work with weapons, it's only looking for one class of actor. So it just became a massive headache to get it to work with anything that wasn't the same class as my weapons. I tried to create a very basic inventory system because I figured I need a way for the player to store the keys that they collect, with the idea that there'll be 3 or 4 different keys around the level and you need to pick up each one of those, get to the main exit, and then the door will register that you have each of those keys and then let you out of the game. But for some weird reason, again, it just wouldn't work, which honestly was quite disheartening. I really didn't think a freaking door and key system would be so hard to implement into Unreal Engine, but for some reason, I just couldn't get it to work. So today is the last day of the 2-week challenge, and I don't know if you can tell, but we are nowhere near being done. So maybe I was being a bit ambitious. So I've come to the conclusion that I should really extend this an extra 2 weeks and make it a whole month challenge. I feel like that's a bit more achievable and I think I can get everything done in a month. So we're going to add an extra 2 weeks to the clock and that time starts now. Still feeling the pressure, I decided to work on the melee system, which is one of the big core features I wanted in this game. At the moment, the melee system just plays an attack animation and then it has an anim notify in that animation, which then spawns a very basic sphere collision in front of the player, and if the enemy collides with that sphere collision, they take damage. It's terrible and it's very janky. But I did find a very interesting tutorial from a YouTuber called Royal Skies, who I think got this tutorial from CyanShin08, I think that's how you say it, who actually has a much more detailed and in-depth tutorial on this subject, where basically instead of using an anim notify in your animation, you use something called an anim state. Everybody say, ooh. I've never heard of these before, but they're really interesting. So the main difference is that you can extend these over a period of time in your animation, and then you can actually go into that notify state and you can add code to it. So I've used these to basically spawn a sphere trace for objects around my weapon. So you basically just add 2 sockets to the player character, one at the base of the weapon, so like near the hand or something, and then one near the tip of the weapon. And then those sockets act as like the start and end point of that sphere trace. And then from here, you can basically add the code for your attack. So when the sphere trace collides with the enemy, it does damage. This is pretty neat because you get a very accurate collision around the weapon, and then you can manually time when you want that attack to do damage. After this was done, I took this to my test level so I could smack up some enemies. And wow, okay. He died really quickly.
So did you set up the damage stats correctly?
Yeah, I mean, everything looks correct.
I wonder if it's doing damage every time the sphere trace collides with the enemy.
What, so the enemy is getting attacked multiple times per attack? Turns out that is exactly what was happening. I tried to fix this by adding a do once node in the code, thinking it would just apply the damage once, but that doesn't work. Even now, I'm still really stumped as to how you would actually fix this problem of dealing damage multiple times. If you have any ideas, please do put it in the comments below, but I figured you'd probably have to do some crazy things where you add like an array of actors that once the sphere collision hits the enemy, it adds it to that array, and then once it's done the damage, it knows I've done damage to that one and then doesn't do it again. But I could just think of so many ways that could go wrong and so many issues with that system. And both the tutorials don't actually talk about how you would then apply the damage using this method. So I'm just really stumped.
Wait, what are you thinking of doing?
Nothing.
You're not going to just lower the damage value of the attack, are you?
Maybe? I mean, it would fix the problem.
But that is a terrible idea, as you would get very inconsistent damage amounts on enemies.
I mean, you see it as a problem, but it could also just promote the player to get an accurate swing on the enemy so it does more damage. So really, it's just a feature.
Oh no.
I kept plowing on trying to get this infantry and keycard system working, but I came to the conclusion that this infantry system has to go. It's wasting so much of my time trying to bug fix, I don't even know if I can get this thing to work. After spending a lot of time searching around on YouTube, I did find a different interaction system that looks so much better than before. I was just really worried I was going to spend hours building this system and then I'd still have problems, there'd still be bugs and things that just wouldn't work. And then I'll have wasted all that time and I'd be straight back in the same spot I am now. But turns out, this was time very well spent. The new interaction system works amazingly. With the outline material that highlights the object and the little UI prompt that tells the player that you can interact with this system, so much better. So I'd say, if you're looking for a good interaction and weapon system, I would use the weapon system from Pitchfork's Academy, and then I'd take the interaction system from Nice Shadows, and then if you combine those together, it is mwah, you would have a really nice modular system. And then if you add in data assets on top for all your items and weapons, that's just like the icing on top. I'm really happy with this interaction and weapon system I've got now. It makes it so easy to add new items and weapons, because basically everything is pulling from the data asset. So if you want to make any variations or changes to a weapon or item, you basically just pull up the data asset, make your changes, and then bam, you're done. It is so good, and it's one of the first systems that I've made that I am genuinely proud of. I gave up trying to model things in Blender because, yeah. So with time ticking down, I went hunting online on Sketchfab for some free models I could find that kind of fit the right aesthetic. Once I found an enemy I liked, I downloaded it, brought it into iClone 8, and started animating their idle pose, their walking animation, as well as some attacks. And with more time, I could probably make this look a lot cooler, but obviously we don't have much time left. There's only a few days left and I still don't have a player character model. So I've gone hunting again on Sketchfab and I found one that's kind of suitably low poly and kind of fits with the PS1 aesthetic. It's definitely not perfect, but it will do the job, and hopefully if I add this in and get everything working, I can get this game done. So just like before, I rigged the character in Character Creator 4 using their AccuRig tool, which makes the whole process really easy. Exported it, brought it into Unreal Engine 5, and then went about replacing the default UE5 skeletal mesh with the new one that we just made, and now bam, everything works.
Did you forget to add the socket to the skeletal mesh?
Maybe? After spending some time adding the sockets to the new player character model and then tinkering with the left-hand IK, everything started to work properly. With only 3 days left, I wanted to get the final touches and systems in. So I needed to tackle one of the final core systems of this game, which was the door system. I kind of had this half made using the old interaction system, but it didn't work. So I gutted it and started again. Using the new interaction system I'd made this a lot easier this time. Although I did realize I did not have time to make the inventory system so I could store multiple keys, which is what I originally wanted when I was concepting the game. So instead, I figured I'd make a simpler system where one key corresponds to one door, and then maybe I'll just have like a few different doors you have to get to, and then a master key which maybe has like a different model or something that you have to use to exit the big door at the end. I spent a day polishing off the level, replacing the item pickups with the new ones, and adding in a few different enemies around the level. And then I had a certain realization, and with that, a certain amount of dread came over me. I realized I haven't changed any of the AI logic that was in the enemies from my previous light gun game, probably because I thought all I wanted them to do was to chase the player and then attack them. But I realized if you put multiple of these enemies and all they do is instantly chase the player and attack them, when you hit play, all of the enemies are going to just swarm towards you all at once and all attack you, which then means you're going to be running away from a horde of enemies. Once you've killed them, there's nothing for you to do. This was not a good realization to have this late in this challenge. I realized I was going to have to go in and add so much extra logic to make the enemy AI fun and the game actually playable. I followed the Smart AI tutorial series by Ali El-Sahiri, who is becoming easily one of my favorite tutorial people to watch. But with the last 2 days ticking by and still dealing with AI perception bugs, I unfortunately just ran out of time. And yeah, I failed the month challenge at the last hurdle. If I could fix this AI perception bug, the whole game would work. And my god, it is really tempting to just sit here for a few more days, you know, and then get it all fixed and get my friends to play it like I originally wanted for this video. But that's not really the point of this challenge at the end of the day. It was the reward. So I may have failed this challenge, which admittedly was a bit ambitious, to make a horror game in 2 weeks. But I have learned so much during this month, and with loads of new coding and Unreal Engine techniques, I really feel a lot more confident in Unreal Engine 5. But I've also learned a lot of other interesting lessons during this challenge about just how tight and streamlined you need to make your ideas, and it's really worth spending a few extra days or even weeks just working out exactly what you want to build in your game, figure out all the potential problems with your features in your game, and then try and figure out how you'll get around those. One thing I have learned though that's made me feel really positive about this whole challenge is that once you've made a system in Unreal Engine, you've kind of done it forever. Because Unreal Engine has a really good migrate feature where you can just click what files you want to send across to your new game, it's worth spending time creating systems and features that are very modular and that you can repeatedly use across all sorts of different games. And this is a very different way of thinking than I'm used to, because I come from video work where you're basically starting a new project from scratch every single time. Whereas with game design, you know, now if I was to make a new game, I can bring across my damage system, I could bring across some enemies, I can bring across a weapon and interaction system. And with each system and feature that I build, it then means that the next game will just become that little bit easier to make. And with that being said, I will fix these last few bugs in the game and add some features that I ended up cutting. I'm very proud of what I've created, and if you want to see me finish off this horror project and also get my friends to play it, then get subscribed.